For all you PlayStation fans out there, you've waited long enough, or I guess, to be more accurate, I would say most of you are probably still waiting. But regardless, PlayStation 5 is finally here. So by now, I would say that most of you out there will have probably seen the design of the PlayStation 5 multiple times. And I would say that it's kind of become somewhat of a conversation starter within the gaming community as a whole. To tell you the truth, I'm still 50-50 on the design. On one hand, I kind of want to applaud Sony for coming out with such a radical design that's quite the departure away from the PlayStation 4. It really is unique and it stands out. On the other hand, I really like the monolithic block design of the Xbox Series X. In comparison, it's much smaller and compact and would just about fit in any room you want to put it in. I guess only time will tell if this design would grow on me, but there's definitely one thing which I really don't like, and that's the glossy black plastic finish that runs through the middle of the console. I understand that Sony was trying to go for that two-tone look in both the color and the texture, but I'm honestly not too sure. That glossy plastic really makes it feel cheap, and scuff and scratches are really easy to notice as well, so there's that. Now I foresee that a lot of you guys would probably use the PS5 standing up, and with that, perhaps forego the included base. In my opinion, I think it's fine either way, because while some others claim it might restrict airflow without it, I hardly think so because the fan is at the top of the console, not the bottom, and unlike the Series X, the air gets pulled in from the front and out the back. Personally, I use the base because it's an easy measure to prevent it from getting lost, and well, it's already included, so why not? Anyways, once you get your PS5 all set up, well, this is where the next gen experience truly starts. First off, you get treated with a new UI that's slight but nice refresh. It's basically like that of dynamic menu in the PS4, but just refined with new animations and effects. In fact, it's like taking the UI of the PS4, squeezing them down and pushing all of it into the top left corner. Kind of. And of course, Sony has decided to standardize the cross button for confirm and circle for cancel. For those of us in Asia, kind of a bummer because I've always associated circle for confirm and it's naturally always the rightmost button. But well, you get used to it. Apart from that, some things are actually downright similar or flat out the same, like the settings menu and the such. If you're familiar with the PS4, you'll be right at home with the PS5. But now, let's talk about what truly matters, the performance and the games. For PS5, it's basically touting the same kind of experience that the Series X is going to provide, which is basically up to 4K gaming at 120 frames per second and ray tracing as well. Now, unlike the Series X, there are actually next-gen games that's only available to play on the PS5, such as the Demon's Souls remake. But what's just as neat is backwards compatibility. Basically, any game you own on the PS4 will be playable on the PS5. If you own a digital collection, you just need to log into your account and reinstall it onto the PS5 and play it that way. If you own a physical copy, just insert the disc and once it's installed, go ahead and play it. Either way, it just works. Although you don't get a feature like Quick Resume, the PS5 still boots into the game just as fast as the Series X thanks to the insanely fast custom SSD that's built in. But back to the next gen stuff, and we start with Spider-Man Miles Morales. For this game, you can basically choose between high fidelity or high performance mode. In high fidelity mode, the game runs at a resolution of 4K with ray tracing turned on. This is the mode you want to be in if you really want to experience the best that Spider-Man Miles Morales has to offer in terms of visuals. The actual real-time reflections really make the city feel much more alive. But, and it's a big but, you are limited to just 30 frames per second. On the other hand, if you choose high performance mode, the game runs just below native 4K and you don't get ray tracing, but now you enjoy a really smooth 60 frames per second. Compared to the PS4 version, you're playing a better rendition of the game no matter which mode you choose. It just depends on which you favor more, frames per second or that immersive ray trace world. This kind of decision making also stays true in a game like Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. The difference, however, would be the option between choosing ray tracing and playing at 60 frames per second, or turn ray tracing off and enjoy up to 120 frames per second, which I dare say is the much bigger game changer. But I'm not going to dive too deep into the visuals and performance of Black Ops Cold War, for this game has a far more interesting feature, and it has everything to do with the new DualSense controller. Compared to the previous DualShock 4, the DualSense is definitely much larger and curvier. Gone are the hard edges, now all replaced with a smooth contour that really makes the DualSense the much more comfortable controller to hold. The DualSense also introduces a new haptic feedback system and improved motion sensors, but by far the most impressive has to be the adaptive triggers. I've mentioned this before, but basically, developers are free to implement any kind of feature into their game that directly ties to those adaptive triggers. So for instance, you can change things like the tension of the triggers, the actuation point, or even the feedback of the triggers itself, so on and so forth. And Black Ops Cold War is one game that really makes full use of this. Call of Duty is all about gun gameplay, and in reality, different guns have different weight, different triggers, different recoil strength and pattern, and more. This is reflected directly onto the adaptive triggers. Say you have a handgun like a 1911. Pressing down L2 is easy and pretty light, and your character aims down the sights pretty fast. As for R2, which is your trigger, you'll find that there's zero tension as you start to depress it, until you reach about the 20% mark, where you literally feel like you hit the wall inside the trigger housing. Put in enough force and you'll pass that point instantly and fully depress the trigger, thereby firing your handgun in the process. If you're familiar with firearms in general, it's basically a two-stage trigger. Now if you swap weapons over to something like the XM4 or the Stoner light machine gun, the triggers changes immediately. Pressing down L2 is now really heavy, and it is reflected on your character as aiming down sights now take much longer, owing to the increased weight of the weapon. The R2 trigger on the other hand, you still get a two-stage trigger, but once you depress enough to hit that wall, the end of the first stage, you have to put in even more strength to actually actuate the trigger compared to that on the handgun. With the weapons being fully automatic, you also realize that the trigger kicks about as you hold down the trigger, kind of replicating the recoil you would feel when you're unleashing lead down the range. This single feature is what makes the DualSense so unique and sets it apart from the Series X controller. Now it might not be that viable if you want to be really competitive in multiplayer, but in the campaign, I do feel it really adds another layer to the experience, and it's a physical one which is unlike anything in the past. Honestly, while I'm still not too sure about the design of the PS5, the DualSense controller, that's a winner to me. So overall, I'm really impressed with the PS5. Just like the Series X, it is next gen true and true and runs just as quiet as well. But there is one downside which I do have to mention, and that's storage. Now don't get me wrong, that 825GB custom SSD that's inside the PS5 is pretty insane, and it is literally the cornerstone of the next gen gaming experience for the PS5. The issue is the size. First off, it's not even 1TB, but rather 825GB. Honestly, still not too bad. What's troubling is the actual free space available after taking into account the OS. You get only 667.2GB. That's it. Black Ops Cold War by itself already comes in at about 140GB. Add in a few more next gen games which typically average around 80GB and you'll be pretty much out of space. Now the PS5 does support additional storage by means of a standard M.2 NVMe SSD up to the full length, but at the moment it can only be used to install PS4 games, which I can kind of understand because of how tightly integrated the custom SSD is with the next gen games. So if you manage to get your hands on a PS5, I would say to cultivate the habit of deleting your games once you are done with it, more so than the Series X. The other small mention would be HDMI 2.1, which, like I said for the Series X, have to be used in order to enjoy 4K at 120 frames per second. I would say give it a year or so and the market will be much more saturated with TVs and monitors with HDMI 2.1 support, so just be patient. The PS5 retails for 729 Singapore dollars or 499 US dollars, which is basically the same as the Series X for those of you in the States. But you can also pick up the PS5 Digital Edition, which retails for 599 Singapore dollars or 399 US dollars. Unlike the Series S, which is a weaker console compared to the Series X, the PS5 Digital Edition is the same full-blown PS5. It just doesn't come with a 4K Blu-ray drive, and in my opinion, looks slightly better because it's symmetrical. Well, regardless of what you think about the design of the PlayStation 5, it is the next-gen console that you've been waiting for. It will give you a really great gaming experience and arguably a unique one because, unlike Microsoft, Sony is still trying to push quite a lot of exclusive for their console. In any case, do stay tuned because we are still doing one more video on the consoles and we'll be directly comparing between the PS5 and the Series X to give you a little bit more of an insight and perhaps help you make that purchase decision. But in any case, for now, if you have any questions, do drop them down in the comments down below. And if there are affiliate links, do check them out. If you do, thanks for your support. Don't forget to subscribe to us, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Till the next one, see ya!